Hey friends, welcome to my YouTube channel. Don't forget to press the bell icon like thumbs up, share up right arrow, and subscribe red heart.
What happens aback Hollywood's most outspoken host pushes one of cinema's biggest stars accomplished her breaking point. You won't accept what unfolds when Scarlett Johansson sits bottomward for what was declared to be a accepted promotional interview that transforms into a career-defining adversity for Stephen Colbert. Aftermost Night's adventure delivered the affectionate of atomic battle that has the absolute ball industry talking. And by the end of this story, you'll accept why Johansson's dramatic avenue has become the best talked about moment in backward night television history. Before we get into this incredible story, accomplish abiding you hit that subscribe button and bead a comment below because you're not activity to believe what unfolds aback two powerhouse personalities affray in mean cipher saw coming. The backward actualization flat bashed with its accepted pre-taping activity as crew members fabricated final adjustments to lighting and complete equipment. Scarlett Johansson accustomed absolutely on time, her professional address intact, despite what sources backstage declared as an unusually close atmosphere. She'd come to advance her latest absolute film, a affection activity that tackled difficult themes about women's abandon and artistic freedom. What nobody anticipated was how those absolute themes would become the epicenter of a confrontation that would leave audiences stunned and industry insiders questioning aggregate the anticipation they knew about able broadcasting standards. Colbert's aperture address proceeded without incident. His cast smirk and affected political commentary drawing the accepted action from his studio audience. But those accustomed with his account actualization could sense something altered in his activity that night. A accurateness that seemed more aggressive than usual, a redress for conflict that adept entertainment reporters would afterwards alarm as unusually combative, alike for Colbert. When Johansson took her bench above from the host, the antecedent barter appeared deceptively normal. Standard pleasantries about her latest project, the accepted badinage about Alive with acclaimed directors, the affectionate of surface-level celebrity chat that fills most allocution actualization segments. Johansson spoke passionately about her film's exploration of circuitous female characters, emphasizing the importance of accurate storytelling in an industry often criticized for its superficial treatment of women's experiences. It's absolutely about giving women bureau in their own narratives, Johansson explained, her eyes lighting up as she discussed the project's added meaning. Too generally we see changeable characters defined absolutely by their relationships to macho characters or bargain to simple archetypes. This blur challenges audiences to see women as complete animal beings with their own motivations, flaws, and growth. Colbert nodded along, but seasoned admirers of his actualization could detect the attenuate about-face in his expression. That accurate attending he gets when he's advancing to pounce. His next question bent anybody off bouncer with its abrupt about-face in accent and direction. "That's interesting," Colbert said. Aptitude advanced with a smile that didn't ability his eyes. Because some people ability say that's a bit rich coming from Audition who's fabricated a career out of arena characters that are, well, let's be honest, primarily designed to address to macho fantasies. I mean, Black Widow isn't absolutely known for her circuitous close life, is she? The studio admirers fell silent. Johansson's expression anchored almost imperceptibly, but her media training kicked in as she attempted to navigate what was acutely acceptable hostile territory. "I anticipate that's a reductive way to attending at the character," she replied, her articulation absolute steady despite the accessible provocation. Natasha Romanga's adventure arc above multiple films absolutely explores capacity of redemption, family, sacrifice, and finding your actualization afterwards trauma. The fact that she's physically capable doesn't abate her emotional complexity. But Colbert wasn't backing down. If anything, her abstinent response seemed to activate him further. "Appear on, Scarlett," he said, application her aboriginal name with her acquaintance that acquainted invasive rather than friendly. "We're all adults here." The actualization was created to look good in a bound-covering suit. Everything else was aloof window dressing, added. Later, aback bodies started calling out the accessible objectification. "You can't actively sit there and tell me you didn't perceive absolutely what you were signing up for." The restriction in the studio became palpable. Aggregation members exchanged afflictive glances, and several admirers' associates shifted uneasily in their seats. This wasn't the playful battle that Colbert was known for. This acquainted personal, calculated, and unnecessarily cruel. Johansson's jaw tightened, but she maintained her composure with the affectionate of adroitness that only comes from years of ambidextrous with inappropriate questions and sexist commentary. "I anticipate you're conflating the character with the actress," she said, her tone growing acutely cooler. "My job as a performer is to accompany abyss and humanity to every role I booty on, behindhand of how the actualization ability initially be perceived, and I've spent a decade developing Natasha's adventure in means that give adolescent girls a strong, complex female hero to attending up to." Colbert chuckled, a complete that acquainted more condescending than amused. "Right. A strong changeable hero who spends best of her awning time in poses that wouldn't look out of abode in a men's magazine. But hey, at Atomic she kicked some ass between the chargeless shots, right?" The comment landed like a slap. Johansson's professional affectation began to slip, revealing the aboriginal glimpses of genuine anger below her able exterior. "I'm sorry. Are we absolutely activity to sit here and abate my absolute anatomy of assignment to cheap sexualization?" she asked, her articulation ascent slightly. "Because I've been acting for over 2 decades, I've been nominated for multiple Academy Awards, and I've consistently alleged projects that challenge both myself as an artisan and audiences as consumers of media." "Oh, I'm not analytic your talent," Colbert replied with apish reassurance. "I'm aloof apprehensive about your choices. I mean, for Edition who's so passionate about accurate changeable storytelling, you sure assume adequate cashing those Marvel checks for Arena what is essentially a fantasy woman advised by and for men." The allegation afraid in the air like smoke. Johansson's hands, previously bankrupt calmly in her lap, gripped the accoutrements of her chair. Her breathing had become acutely more rapid, and those watching carefully could see the moment aback her media training began to war with her accustomed human instinct to avert herself a join an unprovoked attack. "Those Marvel checks, as you so dismissively put it, have given me the belvedere and financial freedom to aftermath and brilliant in exactly the kinds of accurate belief you're claiming I don't affliction about," she said, her articulation now accustomed an edge. "That made anybody in the flat sit up straighter. And frankly, I acquisition it pretty cogent that you're more interested in disturbing bottom-ward the assignment I've done than absolutely discussing the film I'm actuality to promote." But Colbert had clearly absentatively that this account was going to go his way, behindhand of his guest's abundance or the promotional purpose of her appearance. His next words would prove to be the catalyst that adapted an already uncomfortable bearings into something that would boss-ball news cycles for weeks to come. "Well, maybe if the blur your actuality to promote wasn't Edition vanity project designed to adjust your image after some of your added questionable career choices, would accept added to discuss," he said with a resolve that somehow managed to be both accidental and devastating. The words hit Johansson like a concrete blow. Her face flushed and for a moment the carefully constructed bluff of celebrity pleasantries absurd completely, revealing the raw acrimony and hurt beneath. What happened abutting would forever change how bodies beheld both Scarlett Johansson's adroitness under pressure and Stephen Colbert's reputation as an able interviewer, setting the date for a battle that would escalate far above annihilation anyone in that flat could accept anticipated. The blackout that followed Colbert's vanity activity animadversion connected for what acquainted like an eternity. Johansson sat altogether still, her chest rising and falling with controlled breaths as she candied what had aloof happened. The flat audience, analysis the shift from afflictive badinage to something genuinely ugly, remained arctic in their seats. Alike the cameraman seemed uncertain whether to accumulate rolling or cut away from what was acutely acceptable a disaster. Aback Johansson assuredly spoke, her articulation agitated a alarming calm that anyone who knew her able-bodied would recognize as a admonishing sign. "I'm sorry. Did you just alarm my affection activity a vanity project?" she asked, anniversary chat precisely enunciated. "A blur that took me 4 years to develop that addresses animal assault, workplace harassment, and the systematic silencing of women's choir in corporate America. That's vanity to you." Colbert, either absent to or deliberately ignoring the admonishing signs, angled down with the affectionate of airs that would later be dissected by media critics as a masterclass in how not to conduct an interview. "Look, I'm abiding, it's very important to you," he said with a dismissive beachcomber of his hand. "But let's be honest about what this absolutely is. You've been demography califaction for some of your political comments, your best to work with Woody Allen, that accomplished apparition in the Carapace Bark controversy. This film is aloof your advance to get aback in everyone's acceptable graces by making something that looks socially conscious." The allegation was so far above the bounds of able address that several aggregation associates audibly gasped. Johansson's arranger watching from the wings started effective adjoin the stage before actuality captivated aback by Aegis who weren't abiding what agreement to chase in this aberrant situation. "Are you seriously suggesting that I fabricated a film about animal advance survivors as some kind of PR stunt?" Johansson's articulation was now abashed with almost contained fury. "That the women whose belief I'm telling, absolute women who trusted me with their experiences, that their agony is just absolute for my image rehabilitation." But Colbert seemed to be operating below the apparition that his aggressive access was authoritative for compelling television. Or conceivably he was simply too abysmal into his advance to find a adroit exit. "I'm aloof adage that timing is aggregate in Hollywood," he replied with a beam that would afterwards be frozen in endless unflattering screenshots. "And your timing has been pretty acceptable lately. First, the Marvel movies to accomplish bank, afresh the indie blur to accomplish yourself look serious. Now, the amusing amends project to accomplish yourself attending virtuous. It's a very affected career trajectory. What happened abutting was the moment that everyone in the flat knew they were witnessing article that would be talked about for years." Johansson slowly stood up from her chair, her movements deliberate and controlled, like a predator advancing to strike. "You want to allocution about calculated," she said, her voice now accustomed to animate bend that cut through the flat like a blade. "Let's talk about a allocution actualization host who built his career on political satire, suddenly deciding to advance a guest's personal integrity for bargain ratings. Let's talk about Edition who claims to champion progressive ethics while sitting here attacking a woman for application her platform to amplify added women's voices." The studio admirers was now completely silent. The affectionate of a sleep quiet that only occurs aback bodies apprehend their witnessing article genuinely explosive. Colbert's assured beam began to falter as he seemed to apprehend that he had pushed too far, but his ego wouldn't let him back down. "Oh, appear on. Don't make this about gender," he said, the desperation in his articulation barely concealed. "I'm an according opportunity critic. I go afterwards anybody the same way." "No, you don't," Johansson shot back, her able accord now completely alone in favor of raw, honest anger. "You don't sit actuality and question Ryan Reynolds' motives aback he talks about his affection projects. You don't allege Bradley Cooper of making vanity films aback he directs and stars in austere dramas. You save that particular cast of acrimony for women who cartel to accept opinions about their own careers." The accurateness of her observation hit like a thunderbolt. Several admirers' associates began nodding in recognition, and the uncomfortable shifting in the flat became more pronounced as bodies accomplished they were watching article that went far beyond entertainment into the branch of genuine social commentary. Colbert, now visibly flustered, approved to regain ascendancy of the bearings with the kind of angle that would afterwards be studied in journalism schools as an example of how interviews can go catastrophically wrong. "Look, I think your actuality a little oversensitive here," he said, the words aerobatics out before he could stop them. "I'm just asking the boxy questions that other interviewers are too affable to ask." If he had been acquisitive to conciliate the situation, his best of words could not have been added altogether affected to achieve the adverse effect. The word oversensitive landed in the flat like a bomb. And Johansson's acknowledgement came with the force of years of accumulated frustration with absolutely this affectionate of dismissive attitude. "Oversensitive," she repeated, her articulation ascent to a level that fabricated anybody in the flat lean forward. "I'm annoyed because I object to you abbreviation my life's assignment to a alternation of contemptuous calculations. I'm annoyed because I don't appreciate you suggesting that. Survivors of animal advance are a aloof backdrop in my career strategy." Her articulation cracked slightly on the aftermost words, not from weakness, but from the arduous force of emotion abaft them. For a moment, the carefully complete barrier between celebrity and animal actuality disappeared entirely, and anybody watching could see the absolute being below the public persona, addition who had been genuinely wounded by the apathetic adjournment of work that acutely meant aggregate to her. Colbert, conceivably assuredly acumen the magnitude of his mistake, attempted what would afterwards be declared as one of the most bare affliction in television history. "I didn't beggarly to suggest," he began, but Johansson cut him off with a gesture that labored no agnosticism about her state of mind. "No, you apperceive what?" "Don't," she said, her duke aloft to stop him mid-sentence. "Don't you cartel try to airing this back now. You meant every chat you said, and we both apperceive it. You came into this interview with an agenda, and that agenda was to breach me bottomward for your audience's entertainment." The accusation hung in the air like a baneful cloud. Everyone in the flat could feel the moment aback whatever remained of professional address assuredly died completely, replaced by article raw and absolute and absurd to ignore. What came abutting would transform this confrontation from an uncomfortable interview into a cultural moment that would redefine how bodies anticipate about celebrity interviews, professional boundaries, and the analysis of women in accessible discourse. Colbert, his face now ablaze with a mixture of acrimony and embarrassment, made the baleful accommodation to amplify rather than retreat. Conceivably it was wounded pride. Or maybe he absolutely believed his behavior was justified. But his next words would allowance his fate as the villain of this encounter. "You apperceive what, Scarlett?" "Maybe the botheration isn't my questions," he said, his articulation demography on a awful bend that fabricated anybody in the studio uncomfortable. "Maybe the problem is that you can't handle being challenged. Maybe you're so acclimated to softball interviews and bodies kissing your ass that you've abandoned what real journalism looks like." The flat fell into the affectionate of blackout that occurs before an explosion. Johansson's eyes widened, not with surprise, but with the kind of apparent accuracy that comes when addition crosses a band so egregious that all pretense of amenity becomes impossible. "Absolute journalism," she repeated, her articulation bottomward to a whisper that somehow agitated added menace than any shout. "You anticipate this is journalism? You anticipate ambushing a guest with claimed attacks and abbreviation their life's assignment to abridged account is journalism?" She took a footfall afterpiece to his desk, her absolute aspect radiating controlled fury. "Let me acquaint you what real journalism would attending like. Stephen. Absolute journalism would involve doing absolute analysis instead of recycling annoyed stereotypes. Real journalism would beggarly allurement about the film's a pulse on advanced survivors instead of analytic my motives for making it. Absolute journalism would require treating your guests with basal human dignity instead of application them as punching accoutrements for your own entertainment." Her articulation grew stronger with anniversary sentence, and by the end she was speaking with the affectionate of authoritative ability that fabricated it clear why she had become one of Hollywood's most admired figures. Colbert, now clearly ashamed by her response, made one final atrocious advance to regain control of the narrative. "Oh, please," he scoffed, but his articulation cracked slightly on the words. "Don't address me about journalism. I've been accomplishing this longer than you've been authoritative movies that matter." The insult was so petty, so transparently atrocious that it actually drew oral groans from several audience members. Johansson stared at him for a connected moment. And aback she spoke again, her articulation agitated the kind of adverse calm that precedes complete destruction. "Movies that matter," she again slowly. "You beggarly like the ones that accept grossed over $14 billion worldwide. The ones that accept aggressive endless young women to see themselves as heroes instead of victims? Or are you talking about the absolute films that have tackled issues like animal trafficking, political corruption, and domestic violence?" She paused, absolution the weight of her accomplishments achieve over the studio like a blanket. "But you're right about one thing, Stephen. You accept been doing this best than I've been making movies that matter. Which makes it even more affecting that afterwards all these years, this is the best you can do. This cheap abridged akin character assassination masquerading as an interview." The words landed with surgical precision. Colbert's face went through an alternation of expressions, anger, embarrassment, desperation, before clearing on article that looked almost like panic. As he accomplished, he was being systematically dismantled by someone far added able and articulate than he had anticipated. Now wait aloof a minute, he began. But Johansson was done listening. No, you wait, she said, her articulation cutting through his beef like a knife. I came here tonight to allocution about a blur that addresses absolute issues affecting real women. I came actuality to use whatever platform your actualization provides to amplify voices that are usually silenced. Instead, I got ambushed by Edition, who apparently thinks that advancing women is a cute television. She began moving adjoin the bend of the stage, her publicist assuredly breaking chargeless from the confused Aegis cadre and rushing to accommodate her. And you apperceive what the saddest allotment is. Johansson continued, not breaking stride. You absolutely had an opportunity tonight to accept a meaningful conversation about important issues. You could accept asked about the research process, about Alive with assault survivors, about the challenges of making films that accoutrement difficult subjects. Instead, you chose this. She gestured aback adjoin the account area with accessible disgust. You chose to be another articulation aggravating to breach women down instead of appropriation them up. You chose to perpetuate absolutely the affectionate of toxic behavior that my blur is aggravating to address. And you did it all while hiding behind the pretense of boxy journalism. The flat admirers was now completely transfixed. Many of them above board staring in admiration at what they were witnessing. This wasn't aloof a celebrity having a meltdown. This was a masterclass in how to angle up to bullying while advancement address and intelligence. Colbert, conceivably assuredly acquisitive the magnitude of his able suicide, made one after most atrocious grab for relevance. You can't aloof airing abroad when things get difficult, he alleged out, his voice accustomed to a agenda of genuine desperation. This is how interviews work. There are tough questions. Johansson chockfull at the bend of the date and angry aback to face him one final time. Aback she spoke, her articulation agitated the affectionate of authority that comes from Edition, who has finally had abundant of tolerating the intolerable. Boxy questions, she said, her eyebrows aloft in disbelief. Stephen, you didn't ask me a distinct tough question tonight. You didn't ask about the challenges of depicting trauma responsibly. You didn't ask about the acknowledged obstacles we faced. While researching corporate cover-ups, you didn't ask about the ethical considerations of profit-driven storytelling adjoin authentic representation. Her articulation grew stronger, added confident, as she continued. Those would accept been tough questions. What you did was launch personal attacks bearded as journalism. What you did was try to abate complex artistic and amusing issues to celebrity gossip. What you did was absolutely what every woman in this industry has learned to apprehend from men who feel threatened by our success. The final allegation hit the flat like a thunderclap. Several audience associates gasped audibly, and even the aggregation associates who had been aggravating to maintain able disengagement were now above board staring in shock. Colbert opened his aperture to respond, but no words came out. For the aboriginal time in the absolute encounter, he seemed to grasp that he had not aloof absent the interview. He had absent it so completely and so about that there would be no recovery. Johansson took advantage of his abashed blackout to bear her final statement. I achievement your admirers got the entertainment they came for, she said, her articulation accustomed to admixture of sadness and contempt. Because that's all this was, bawl at the amount of meaningful discourse. I achievement it was worth sacrificing whatever candor you had labored as a journalist. With that, she turned and absolved off the stage, her heels beat adjoin the attic in the dead blackout that had engulfed the studio. Her arranger abrupt afterwards her, shooting antagonistic looks aback at Colbert, who remained arctic abaft his desk, like a man who had aloof watched his career blast in absolute time. The flat admirers sat in stunned silence for several connected abnormal before a few bodies began to applaud. The applause grew, overextension through the audience until about anybody was clapping. Not the affable scripted applause of a allocution show, but genuine appreciation for Edition, who had stood up to her annoyer with grace, intelligence, and adverse effectiveness. Colbert remained at his desk, his face cycling through expressions of confusion, anger, And what ability have been the aboriginal glimmers of understanding about what had aloof happened? The cameras connected rolling, capturing every moment of his abasement for posterity. As the acclaim assuredly died down and the flat lights began to dim, one affair was bright clear. Everyone who witnessed this battle had just a parent article extraordinary. They had watched a able woman banned to be diminished, banned to be silenced, and banned to abide behavior that had been absolved for far too connected in the entertainment industry. The interview was over, but the chat it sparked was just.
Thank you for watching my video.